We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they have been endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the original draft, Jefferson said we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable. What was sacred and undeniable 200 years ago now has been called into question and is now being challenged. Unalienable rights, that which cannot be conferred by man and subsequently can never be taken away. They derive from an ultimate source of authority, a divine bestowal, God's value of man. Immediately someone says, I want to talk about the First Amendment, but don't talk about God. You can no more talk intelligently about the First Amendment without a theological, philosophical perspective than you can send a man to the moon without a recognition of the laws of Newton. It's asinine. For over 100 years before this document was formulated, the colonies were founded on the substratum of unalienable rights. There was great diversity: Catholics, Jews, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Baptists, Congregationalists, Anglicans. But they had one thing in common. They had one common denominator, and that was the concept of the foreloving of God. That man's value and man's worth comes from the fact that before creation, before time, God loved man. And because God loved man, that gave him an individuality, that gave him a worth, that gave him a dignity that no educational system, no political structure could ever inculcate in man. Because those structures are temporary, they are transitory, but the inalienable right comes from an eternal heart of an eternal God. They believe that when man came out of the womb of his mother, that he looked up to the heavens and there was a sphere, there was a domain there that never would be intruded by the ill-disciplined, interposing hand of man. And in that sphere, there came the eternal dignity and rights of liberty of man. Man's liberty, his right of destiny, his right of freedom, all originated from this eternal destiny of eternal right of liberty from this sphere that was there when man was birthed. And they said that it was the justification of government, the prime concern of government, to forever keep out of intruding into that sacrosanct area, man, the state. And when Jefferson, who had a concept of unalienable rights, and he was influenced by John Locke, who was the political and philosophical genius of the day, who Locke had said that where law ends, tyranny begins, that no law should ever have jurisdiction over the souls of men. That was the prime influence of Jefferson. When Jefferson came to grips with how in the world he was going to form a tolerable relationship between one hand of ultimate power of man, raw human authority, and the other hand of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he grappled with that problem because he understood the flow of history. And that was that authority in the hands of man has a momentum all its own. And the momentum is that it becomes despotic and tyrannical. And he knew that the precedent of the rise and fall of nations had taught him that. So immediately Jefferson said, I am going to take the meaning, the fiber, the fabric of unalienable rights, the public acknowledgement that God is the ultimate authority over man. I am going to constitute an indispensable, fragile velvet glove. And I'm going to put this little glove over the hand of raw human authority that by its own nature is unrestrained. So when Jefferson said we are endowed with our Creator with certain unalienable rights, he was fitting over the hand of government this fragile little glove. And for 200 years, there has been a tolerable relationship between state power and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because of this little fragile velvet glove that is the buffer between friction that would ultimately crush life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and bring it under the boot heel of insensitive rule. But in the last 15 years, what the framers of the Constitution feared would happen has happened. Their concept of liberty was that liberty was the luxury of self-discipline. It was structured freedom. And in the last 15 years, we have been in the midst of liberty becoming absolutism. The excesses of liberty have invited by necessity government intervention to try to produce tolerable social behavior. And more law coming down in an attempt to produce tolerable social behavior is cutting away at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the sagacious man, the man who is discerning and keen, can see already on that velvet glove of protection the fingertips of raw human authority beginning to protrude. And it's frightening. The subtlety about this movement is, they said the only justification for the existence of a constitutional democracy was to keep the glove on the hand to protect the populace. But in trying to produce acceptable behavior to the community, the responsibility on the shoulders of those that govern, there has been a dramatic shift of responsibility from off their shoulders. And ladies and gentlemen, tonight, the responsibility of maintaining the glove of unalienable rights is no longer on government, it's on our shoulder. When that glove ever comes off the hand of power, you will see anything from a totalitarian dictatorship to anarchy. I ask that the strength of the Almighty would infuse every one of us with a vigilance that we might maintain this fabric of unalienable rights on the hand of the state. And I pray that the might of the Almighty would give us that vigilance so that we can forever stand publicly and say, man's ultimate governing authority rests with God and not man. It rests with God and not the state.